Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so excited to have you with us. We have some really incredible speakers here to share their stories and the work that they're doing in water technology. If we want to wait just like usual a couple minutes for people to join us, I can just sort of give an intro into what's going on in the next couple of weeks. So on Monday, we have the career fair, which is going to be really awesome. We have somebody from the Stanford Woods Institute coming to talk about their environmental master's program, somebody from the UPenn nonprofit leadership program, Microsoft, a whole host of companies that are really interested in sharing opportunities, internships, and the work that they're doing in sustainability, both as a direct focus and how they're incorporating that into their organization as a whole. So we would love for you to all join us. It is a really incredible opportunity for networking and learning more about the direction you want to go and what you want to do. And then on Thursday is our final session where we will conclude everything and say goodbye and also hello, because this is just the beginning and we're so excited to have everybody included in what we're doing moving into the future and have you all be part of emissaries programming into the future as well. I guess it has been a little bit, so we can go ahead and get started. West, if you want to give a blessing, and then Stuart, if you want to sort of give a background on our speakers, and then we can get into tonight's session.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Well, I'm fortunate enough to actually live in coastal California in Santa Barbara, so I just got out of the water, the ocean water. Most of us don't realize that the ocean is the ultimate source of water on this planet right now. A lot of that is evaporated, and the clouds move over the continents and rain and produce the rivers and the lakes and the groundwater that we use as a freshwater source. But ultimately, that comes from the oceans. So I think in this year where it was Stuart's idea to sort of celebrate the oceans. I think in that spirit, we'll raise a glass to water, which was ultimately part of the ocean and is now as part of us.
Thank you so much, West. Stuart, I know you're on the road. Are you at a point where you can give an intro, or should we?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Wes, thank you for the cheers to the water and the ocean water, which is apropos and so timely for our discussion today, as we'll be talking about this both with Peter and Neil. I'll first just give you quick introductions for both, because they'll tell you a lot more details about themselves and what they're doing and how they're leading the world in the most innovative technologies relating to water. And Peter has created a think tank, more of a salty water tank, that is focused on desalination solutions.
Are we losing him?
Sounds like we've lost him.
Yep.
Stuart, you drove around the bend, buddy. I'm sure he's backing up now. You know, I'll take it from here since we have a loose mic. Always good to scramble for the mic. So, Stuart, I'm going to take over. All right, buddy. So, okay. I'm Peter Fiske. Good to meet you all. I'm coming to you from San Francisco. I live here in the Bay Area, and I'm the executive director of NAUI, which is the National Alliance for Water Innovation. It's a 5-year, $110 million research program focusing on water treatment and desalination. And of course, the ambulance should come by right when, there they go, right when I begin my prepared remarks, but it's sound of authenticity here. So, so I guess I'll share a couple slides with my background, and then actually before I go any further, that's just me. And Neil, why don't you just introduce yourself first, and then I'll spend about 5 minutes talking a little bit about my background. Then I'll hand it back to you, Neil. You talk about 5 minutes about your work and your business, and then we'll come together with a group discussion. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks for the leadership, Peter.
No worries.
Hi, everyone. I'm Neil Grimmer. I'm the brand president of Source Global. have a background in the natural organic industry. I started and led an organic baby food brand called Plum Organics. We invented the squeeze pouch baby food, and then did a couple other businesses. And most recently, I was the brand president of Harley Davidson. So I've been in service to babies and bikers, and there's a shocking similarity between those two. And now everyone in between with Source. And just really quickly, Source Global has a core technology called a hydro panel, where we're able to sustainably pull water out of the atmosphere and convert it into purified drinking water. It's decentralized technology, can scale much like solar, and we're at this point in 52 countries, operating in a number of different applications. But it's great to be here. It's great, Wes. Thank you for the blessing, Peter. I fundamentally believe it's a holistic set of solutions that are going to help humanity with the water crisis that we face. So it's an honor and a privilege to be sharing the mic with you.
Oh, you bet. All right, everybody. So I've got just a few slides to introduce myself. I think the theme today, Neil, is using tech for good. And I love that. So that's what I titled my slides. And in fact, I think I'd start by, for those of you, I think most of the emissaries are, in school, in undergraduate or grad school. But this image that I encountered on the cover of a book years and years ago, at a certain point was exactly how I was feeling when I was finishing up my graduate work. And I wanted to share it with you because in some respects, it encapsulated all the sort of terror and excitement I was feeling. Because on the one hand, you've been in this environment, an academic environment, and it's very orderly, and what you're told what to do, and you've got all your work and assignments, etc. And then there's a certain point at which we push you out. And when you first encounter the outside world, even though you might have been doing summer internships, et cetera, there's a lot that's different. And one of the things that I always encourage people earlier in their career to understand is that it's natural to feel a certain degree of trepidation. And it's also natural to look at careers and think that there's like a very clear and set way to go. And, even though my career, it's taken me in a lot of different directions, it kind of hovers around three areas: science, business and teaching, and public policy. And I got my undergrad at Princeton and my PhD at Stanford. And then I was a postdoc at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. But then I figured, oh no, I know where I should be. I know where I should be in my life. I should be in Washington, D.C. So I went to Washington, D.C. and did a program called the White House Fellowship for a year, worked in the Pentagon, which was a totally unfamiliar environment for me. And basically within about, 2 months of being in Washington, D.C. in this fellowship program, et cetera, I kind of was like, oh crap, this isn't gonna be the right place for me. And so I went on and I ended up back into academia, this time on the other side, in business school. And I got my Haas MBA. And then while I was still in my MBA program, started my first company, which is a technology company in optics manufacturing. And then my second major venture was a company called Pax Water Technologies, which used the principles of biomimicry as essentially a design guide for how we can develop energy efficient water treatment and water systems by simply studying natural systems and understanding where they're so efficient. And then, frankly, something they tell you never to do in school, which is to plagiarize. We work with Mother Nature and plagiarize all that great work, and then took those designs into the municipal water sector. So I finally, after that, have ended all the way back where I began in science. And as I said, after wrapping up with Pax Water and selling Pax Water, I am now the executive director of the Department of Energy's largest investment in water treatment research since the Kennedy administration, 5 years, $110 million research program. And my role as executive director is to hunt down the key innovators and support them as they drive the performance of desalination and water reuse forward. And that's my world. But, I just want to kind of wrap up and say, a lot, I think, of what Water Emissaries is trying to do is excite you, but also challenge you a little bit, and have you understand that what you do for a career is a very personal thing. And I understand that it's influenced by your parents and your family. It's influenced by your upbringing, by your own personality and your temperament, but also by random encounters and chance opportunities. So one of the hopes we have for this program is that you have a random encounter with somebody, either another fellow classmate or one of us, and something gets sparked and you go off to do great things. But when I think of entrepreneurship, and Neil, I'd appreciate your thoughts on this as well, is that I often think that this is first and fundamentally a personal choice that people make. It's a career choice. You know, it's a choice to, in some respects, take on something a little less structured, a little less certain. And it might seem a little riskier, but I don't know, Neil. I mean, I look at corporate America today, and that looks pretty damn risky to me too. So part of me feels like I think that we can get kind of hung up on the idea of startups being very big risk-taking ventures. And frankly, I think that startups, especially at the right stage in your life, can be enormously nourishing for how you take technology, which is great. I love technology, but I only really love it if it's going to help people do stuff. And so my commitment to go back to, you know, quote unquote academia in a national lab was not simply to do great science, but also to help scientists understand the role they play in inventing things for people, and in fact, making people's lives better. I'm going to skip all the way to the end and just say one other thing, because I was going to tell you a story about Ted Turner, oddly enough. But I guess one other thing I just want to say is that I think another thing that I'll just share with you that I labored over was the idea that entrepreneurship is sort of solely the domain of people who look like me, or people look like Neil. And I got to tell you, I'm now coaching in the Elemental Accelerator program, and I am meeting entrepreneurs all around the world. And these people are fantastic. And you could be an entrepreneur in any shape or size, and frankly, at any stage in your life. In fact, I tend to believe that entrepreneurship is not just capital E entrepreneurship, which is to say, starting a business, you know, doing that sort of thing, but also what I would say little e entrepreneurship, right? And I consider little e entrepreneurship simply being willing, when the right opportunity comes to you for whatever reason. The choice of the entrepreneur is simply to act, and to not be a spectator, but to get out there and do it. And so I just simply say that, you know, my experience so far, oddly enough, is that entrepreneurship is not about risk taking, although at certain times there certainly is some risk that's involved. But frankly, entrepreneurship is simply a willingness to look around for what's missing in the world and be observant, gather data, question assumptions, and then, but most critically, when you finally see that thing that upsets you or irritates you or fascinates you so much that you just decide that you're going to jump into action and make it happen. And that's kind of what I've learned at this point. And I hope that in your time with the emissaries that you've had a little bit of experience in that. So that's it for my prepared remarks. And Neil, I'd invite you to kind of say whatever you got to say.
Thanks, Peter. And, you know, it's funny just hearing it through your world and your eyes. It sort of resonates deeply with my experience as well. And, you know, and actually I'll pick up on a point and I'll start my talk based on that point, which is, I think there's these notions of what makes a great entrepreneur, what makes a great business person. And the reality is I started my career as an artist and a punk rock musician, you know, playing in a small little club called Gilman Street and opening up for Green Day. Never would have imagined, roll the clock forward, that I would have started my own company. Never would have imagined that it would have been one of the fastest growing food companies in America, sold to Campbell Soup. And then I would be an executive at Campbell Soup for 5 years and go on to do all these other things, right? And it's in that moment where, you know, if I rewound the clock, I think about the people that influenced me the most, and they were my mentors, right? And what I love about this program, and I love the environment that Stuart and Wes have created here, is that at the end of the day, it's those people that showed me pathways I could never have imagined for myself. I had one individual named David Kelly, who was the founder of IDEO. He was my professor at Stanford when I was a graduate student there in product design. And David saw something in me. I just thought I was this punk rock kid artist, and I somehow wolf in sheep's clothing made my way to Stanford and was doing all this cool product innovation, and then found my way to IDEO, where I was all of a sudden out of the gate starting to work on problems for Mercedes-Benz and Cargill and McDonald's, and you name it. I was now in these highly influential roles in a product perspective, and just being like, well, where am I? And it was this individual that basically said, it's creativity that's missing in the world of business, and creativity with nonlinear thinking combined with tools that you can, problem solving tools. And in my case, I studied mechanical engineering at Stanford to learn those skills that ultimately brought together a set of skills that allowed me to sit around a table with executives in Fortune 500 companies and start to give guidance on what I saw as possible futures as it related to product. And that experience, quite frankly, gave me the confidence to unplug from all of that, start my own company with the former CEO of Cliff Bar, Cheryl O'Loughlin, and I got together and we said, all right, we both have kids. Let's reinvent the way kids are eating in America today. And as I mentioned, I didn't have any business background, but because we were so passionate of solving that problem, I had 2 young daughters. I always like to say they had me wrapped around their little finger from day one, so much so that I contoured my entire life and career around them. And it was that passion and love for them. It was that skill set I learned from my mentor, David Kelly, combined together, where we then saw the path to a business opportunity. And we learned by doing, and we ended up iterating and landing on the right thing. And then it was like a rocket ship. And to me, that is entrepreneurship, which is if you deeply care about something and you see the problem, the opportunity, and you can identify how you and your unique skills can step into that opportunity, that's the path to entrepreneurship. Nothing more complicated than that. And I agree, Peter, it's not, I wouldn't qualify it as risky, but I would say if it's important enough for you to dedicate your time, it's important enough for someone else that will buy that product, service, or technology you're doing. And I want to take a beat or two, if you can. I want to share a couple slides about Source, because why I'm here is that my dear friend and fellow at the Aspen Institute, that's where Cody and I met each other. He started Source in 2015, material scientist from ASU, and he started this company. He was working on renewable energy sector and actually was working on battery technology in Africa, how to bring kind of the principles of renewals in the developing world. And he witnessed while he was there, girls and women fetching water and spending the majority of their day fetching water in very treacherous conditions, whether it's wildlife or other humans, or just the brutality of carrying water on your back every day, or on your head for that matter. And he said, I want to solve that problem. And that was the origin of Source, was literally a mission to basically create a technology that, ultimately stop girls and women from fetching water. So let me show you that technology real quick. And again, you think about that, how almost organic that process was for Cody, led to the development of this technology. Looks like a solar panel and works off the same principles of renewables as solar, which is each one of these panels creates water in and of itself. Perfect drinking water. It's mineralized for health and taste, but it's purified water. It's pure water vapor from the air, powered by the sun. And each panel independently produces water. But the beauty of it is when you put these together in large arrays, like you can do with solar, you can put thousands of panels together to create millions of liters of purified drinking water every day, or millions every year. So that's the beauty of it. And ultimately, I want to play you a quick video. Hopefully it'll translate sound and otherwise, of a program we did with Starbucks, where Starbucks gave us the challenge of saying, coffee growers are an important part of our ecosystem. We consider them our partners. And we know many growers around the world lack access to drinking water. And so they gave us one of the most intractable problems, a mountainous region in Timor-Leste, to solve the drinking water problem. And their girls and women are fetching water 2 to 3 hours a day. We took the challenge, and this is the end result of that. Let's see if we can get this to roll.
Mudança boa tá na sorma da bene. Bene agora fim mais é a minha bairro de home. Então não sei o que é isso. Não vou estar lá para aqui.
Presidente para a cooperativa Café Timor. E hanya serviço né harensan orientação ba funcionário ser hot atau hal serviço kono ba café ya Timor Leste. Be biasa mehe mukab moras ka jarian ne.
Mimos amla precisa para tuba curta bematan goriba nona pari mos si hantempo de bem ai maklaya mos am si babutai e mo de ton. Em singa serviço kamano yamo.
Agar esteves ba be ne azuler se Starbucks. Mai be iha agar esteves ba amne bel he kampanya di jane. Bel foresi be mos pamiras pa komunidade tama. Ne am sila luar.
What do you guys think? All right. All right, we'll turn it back over. No, Stuart, we got Stuart, or we, Peter, if you and I are still riffing on
Maybe
this.
just be
I
you and
think
me
we
there,
lost.
buddy. Yeah.
We lost Stuart along the way. But I was gonna say this sort of links back to we had Georgie Badil join us earlier this fall, and she spoke a lot about the work that she's doing and sort of working on solving the same problem of we have women and girls around the world that are gathering water for so many hours a day, and how do we solve this? And I think that the fact that there are so many ways that you can solve a problem is something that we aren't necessarily talking about in the water sector. And so it's I don't know if Peter, you and Neil can sort of speak more on that, but you know, with science and technology, it's amazing that we have the opportunity to create solutions to these problems in so many different ways, because a lot of times the rhetoric, especially with climate change too, is like we're going to find one be all end all solution that sort of takes everything away from us, and how important it is to understand that like we can all find different ways to solve these things and approach them.
Actually, Neil, can I start by kind of pointing out one of the interesting things about water is that, you know, for starters, water as a sustaining resource for us is required. And we often, you know, tend in when we think about technologies for water, we tend to think about the water itself. We kind of say, well, gosh, maybe the problem is water is so cheap, or like, you know, in the developed world, water is very cheap, et cetera. But one of the things that I think that your case study shows is that we tend not to look at water in a broader economic context. And that is those women had a supply of water, but it necessitated hours of human labor and fuel loads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that when you look at the aggregate cost of that water, it's much, much higher than what we think it is. And so it's a dilemma sometimes because people are often drawn to feel like, well, water should be free, and the answer is yes. And when it falls from the skies, it is. But when we need it at a certain time, or we need it because we are living in a certain place, so the water can be of enormous economic value. And so I just think, that's one of the things I take from that case.
No, and right on, Peter. I mean, one of the things, we look at, take India, for example, the diarrheal cases, the government manages the health crisis around the available water is so significant, with such an economic burden on the overall government, just on solving that part of the problem, right? Yeah. People drinking unsafe water, getting sick, and then that has an economic cost. And then, of course, the other part that you're talking about, which I think we think a lot about, which is when you have to spend the majority of your day fetching water or fetching firewood to clean that water, that means you don't have personal prosperity or economic prosperity for the community, for yourself and for the community. Yeah. And that's a massive cost, right? And so, at the end of the day, and the last point I'll make is not all water is created equal, as we know. Yeah. Being able to have potable water that is sufficient for sustaining human health, that's a measure, and I would say that is a standard that we need to hold high, because of all those trickle down issues that come from that. Yeah. And subsequently, lowest cost of water has new meaning when you take the first 2 liters that are the most important 2 liters of that person's life. Yeah. Okay, well, that water may cost a little bit more, and then let's go to the next set of liters, and then what's the cost of that? And in aggregate, and this is where, now I'll take it back to you and the technology reviews you're doing, which is when you have a holistic set of water technologies, you can start to have equations that look more like that, right? Yeah. Because you're solving discrete water problems with discrete technologies, but those technologies can be bound together in holistic systems that solve the whole problem for the human, as opposed to, the one size fits all, as you said earlier, which I appreciate.
Yeah, that's great. I want to encourage everybody on the line, Kaylee and Leah and Hannah, Caroline, Gargi, to have any questions that you want. Raise your hand, and then we can call on you, and Neil and I can continue riffing. But tell me a little bit about, one of the things that I always like to emphasize when I talk to kind of people early in their careers is there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, a little bit about what a startup is. And, when you think about a startup, you mentioned something in your story, Neil, that I thought was particularly emblematic. And that is that we tend to think of startups as little businesses, but really a startup is kind of a question. It's kind of an experiment we're going to run. Totally. And we're going to sit there and say, well, damn these freaking little jars, and like, there's got to be a better way. And you come up with like an irritation or a question. And then you ask yourself, well, can I put a set of systems around this that represents a repeatable and scalable business where I'm able to deliver value in excess of the cost? Once I kind of figure out that that's possible, that's what a startup is. It's kind of like it's a temporary experiment designed to determine a repeatable, scalable value proposition and business model. And once you have determined that value, business model, then, as you said, quote unquote, it took off. And the answer is, aha. Once you figure that out, it takes off.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you talk about kind of that irritation. At Stanford and at IDEO, they encouraged us, I'd encourage all of you to do this as well. Keep it a little tiny notebook, in your back pocket, and create a bug list, which is all the things that you find annoying of products that are out there, or things that are missing that you wish you had, or whatever it is. And it should be really random, and it should be sort of small and even almost deemed insignificant. Sometimes. Yeah, it's sort of frivolous, because what you train your brain to do is you're now starting to do problem solution in that sort of rapid, succinct way. And when you create the bug list, ultimately, that's what led me to, years of doing that with David Kelly, my mentor, being like, do the bug list. Where's the bug list? When I became a parent, I was like, oh my God, the bug list.
Bugs galore.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's just a really cool way of getting at that earliest thing, which ultimately becomes the insight, the aha, that then leads to a product or service or technology that then, you know, Peter, as you said, gets into product market fit, where you're like, all right, I've got a prototype of an idea. Does anyone care about it as much as I care about it? And you got to do that thing. And when you feel like you do, and people do, then you're like, all right, we're off to the races. And then you build out the team and all the chops needed to get that job done. But I love the you know, and it's funny even just reflecting, and I love the simplicity of that as a start point, because it's accessible to everyone.
Yeah, and you're probably not alone in those things that
Exactly
are annoying you.
That's it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you find it annoying, a bunch of other people do too, and those are your customers, and you're like, awesome, now you're out there, you know, now you're off to the races.
Yeah.
The whole like aha moment, light bulb thing, yeah, maybe not. It's a process, and I think it's training your brain to find those moments and opportunities. And I think one last comment I'll make, and we'd love to hear from all of you, and we're doing a lot of talking here, but it's having an abundance mindset where it's like, you know, yeah, there's friction and there's gravity in the world and all this stuff, and there's a lot of things that'll make an idea really bad. But if you have an abundance mindset, you're constantly looking for things, you're constantly jotting down ideas, and it's in that abundance that you'll find the one thing or the set of things that truly does feel resonant to you and others.
Yeah. So what questions do you have, people? Kaylee, what question do you have? I know you have a question. Everybody does. What's yours?
Mine's more about like back when you were talking about your like your project and like the solar panels, and it was just like, how much can one solar panel produce, and like how long does it take?
It's a great question. So it's dependent on a lot of environmental factors, but generally speaking, a hydro panel can produce roughly between 3 to 6 liters of drinking water a day. And relative humidity affects that number. The amount of sun and sun exposure affects that number. You know, so that varies day by day, much like solar panels do, because, you know, it's all the factors that come to it. But what's really cool is when you pull it out of the box, there's not, you know, it's not like you have to plug it into a bunch of stuff. Like if you set it up, within 15 minutes, it starts working, and within an hour, you'll have a glass of water. Right. So it's pretty cool in that way. It's very simple and elegant in that way.
Do they even work at night, Neil, or do they only work when the sun shines on them?
You know, one of the more recent iterations of the technology is actually doing work 24/7. Mm-hmm. And it's using the cycles for the various, like when the sun's out, we use the heat of the sun and obviously the sun for the solar panel that's in the product to power all the electronics. But then you get all the benefits of temperature differential in the evening and dew point rising and all that good stuff. So we've really kind of capitalized on all, and much like Peter talked about, biomimicry, capitalizing on the natural kind of elements and bringing them into a system that we can actually harness those natural phenomena.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Gargi.
Hi.
Hey.
Can they be modified? Can they be modified like according to like the area, the climate, the terrain? Like, can they be modified according to like need, whether a particular area needs more water from, you know?
Well, one of the things and I'll do a very cursory job explaining this, but there's actually machine learning that's part of the panel itself, which is it taking in all the environmental factors and it is optimizing itself based on the specific environment. So, you know,
it learns to make more water, right, Neil?
For the purpose of optimizing water production.
Yeah.
100%.
To make more water.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. How about others?
Do you see Tom's question in the chat?
Let's take a look. Tom, does rainwater collection work well in the remote communities looked at in the video we watched? Yeah, that's a great question. Neil, do you know about that community? Did they rely on much rainwater capture?
You know, honestly, in that community itself, they don't use rainwater capture technology, but you know, it is certainly in remote communities, rainwater capture is a solution. The challenge is that rainwater isn't as predictable as it used to be, right? I mean, kind of, it's a little bit game over in terms of like when you'd have very predictable seasons and very predictable amounts of rainwater, it becomes a very predictable water supply, right? When you have that lack of predictability, that's where things get difficult, right? Because as humans, we need predictable water supplies. So it's part of a solution. It's not a holistic solution. And obviously rainwater needs cleaning and purifying, and God forbid stuff gets in there, which stuff gets in there, and you got a whole nother thing on in your hand. But it is,
a real problem. Everybody needs to watch out for bird poop, people. Bird poop's really bad. It's actually one of the vectors, bat poo. That's what we're thinking might be one of these vector causes that we're getting some of these interspecies transmission of viruses. So that's one of the challenges of rainwater capture. Is typically the rain lands on a surface, usually a roof. That's where the birds hang out. You get bird poop, and so you still have to do a lot of treatment to make sure that that water is safe to use. It can be done.
Absolutely.
But that can be bad, especially even in tropical climates, that people still have to be very careful. Great question, Gargi. Yeah, go ahead.
So do you take into consideration contaminants as well, the contaminants in the rain, when it's pulling the water out of the atmosphere? Like there's
that's a great question. Like what else is in the air that might get into the hydro panel that gets into the water, Neil?
Yeah, so our technology, it's an excellent question. Our technology is really not influenced by rain, other than it raises relative humidity at the time, before and after the rainfall. But no, I mean, look, the way in which technology works is we have filtration for the air that's coming in. So it's separating any particulate you'd find in the air and then the process, by the very nature of how the process and the technology works, there is a separation of the pure water vapor from the air, which means it is pure. It is literally when we do that separation and that condensation, it is the purest the water can be. And then of course, probably everyone on this knows that it's not great for human consumption to have that water, because it's going to pull the minerals out to balance out the water out of our system. So we mineralize it for health and taste. But really in that process, you actually have a very pure water that comes out.
Yeah, we call it distilled water in the lab.
Distilled water, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
And it also doesn't taste, distilled water doesn't taste very good. If you ever take a swig when your chemistry teacher isn't looking, I don't recommend it. It's not very good.
Totally.
So Hannah has a question here. How long do the panels last? And do you have a full life cycle of the panels? So they get reused and reconditioned and redeployed?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I'll touch on this, and then we should dig into desal as well, because there's some great stuff that's happening with Peter and the technologies he's looking at. But look, so we have a 15-year life cycle on the product. The things that when that 15-year time frame, when those things that fail are typically a swap out of an electronic component. Right. So the panel itself actually can go much longer than that. And with some servicing, that length can increase. But that 15-year cycle, the majority of the product is steel and glass, highly recyclable materials. And so the overall life cycle is actually pretty fantastic on that product itself.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit. I'm not gonna let you go. No, I don't want to talk to you now. It's just fascinating to talk to you about this. So, as you consider, you said you're in 50 some countries now.
That's correct. 52, north of 52.
Yeah. So, will the vision be that you will be doing also some local manufacturing, and if so, what is that kind of side of the things in terms of including job creation for the people who make these panels?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, look, to have that kind of footprint, you have to think about multi-region manufacturing. Today, we manufacture here in Tempe, Arizona, but obviously that is expanding significantly. And there is job creation. There's job creation happening on manufacturing side, but also on installation and service side. So we, even in some of our remote locations, we will have a remote subcontractors that get trained on how to service a hydro panel. And they'll do that work. And in even communities and villages, we will train community members to do the kind of the rudimentary service that the hydro panel needs, like a replacement of an air filter once a year, things of that nature. So, I mean, I think Cody always says this, and I think it's a wonderful kind of way to think about it. Technology is ultimately not the solution for human problems. Humans are the solution for human problems, and technology is a tool to that end. And so community engagement in whatever we do is critically important, right? So when we put a hydro panel, what we call a water farm up, you know, the community members are the farmers. They are the ones cultivating the field and making sure it works and making sure that, you know, it is producing what it needs to produce. And then simultaneously, each panel communicates remote wires to the NOC, which is our network operating center here. So we can see when it's working, when it's not working, and then activate, you know, teams necessary to keep that water farm working well.
Yeah. Riley, what questions do you have? How to unmute myself? That may be one valuable question.
I'm still trying to think of one.
Okay.
I'll get one before we're over.
Okay, super.
Nice.
Peter, I know that you have a lot of experience on like the hard science and lab side of things, and then also within the business side. Maybe you could talk a bit about, we have a lot of students that are either doing research or are interested in doing research in the water sector. I think it'd be really insightful if you could speak a little bit about how you have taken lab experimentation and, you know, seeing things, solving problems scientifically, and then taking that into creating something that people understand and can use.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the really interesting things that we're finding in desalination today is that oftentimes, you know, just like biomimicry, you find that nature has solved and engineered a certain solution. The other thing we're finding is that there are also other industries where you can borrow techniques and technologies. And one of the really interesting ties that we're finding is between desalination and batteries. So it turns out that there's a lot of very valuable research accelerating the capacity of batteries, the cost of batteries. And batteries are all about moving charged ions and sort of moving them across membranes, right? Well, it turns out that's the same transition that you do when you want to pull these ions out of the water and desalinate the water. And so there's a really interesting class of materials that are used in battery cathodes. They're called intercalation compounds. They're actually designed with these very large open cages. And one of the really exciting fields of material science right now is researchers are able to take these very large open, like jungle gym-like structures, and inside each of those sites, they can design a catcher's mitt that fits one specific element, like lithium or gold or arsenic, which is one of the most common and most pernicious, you know, kind of water contaminants. And so then you keep this, it basically becomes a powder, but you sprinkle this powder into the water. It's got an extremely high surface area and all these little catcher's mitts that are begging to be filled, and it pulls out just that element. The particles settle to the bottom, you harvest them out, and you have 30, 40, 50% of the contaminant. Sometimes the contaminant you just want to get rid of. Sometimes it's a valuable constituent. And that gets me back to lithium. It turns out that lithium, as you know, is in your batteries, one of the most important ingredients for these high performance batteries. And we are going to have a severe shortage if we do the right thing, and that is buy more electric cars and have more battery storage. So lithium is going to become a critical gap in our pathway towards sustainability. So we're looking right now at places around the world where lithium is naturally abundant. And that's the neat thing about water. It's the universal solvent. So you've got the entire periodic table sitting in water. And you actually can find these places where you have geologic brines. These are naturally occurring warm brines that have been soaking in the rock and soaking out like a tea bag all the metals. In the Salton Sea, which is the southernmost California, inland from San Diego, there is a very large geothermal field, and it's been producing energy, clean geothermal energy, for decades. Well, scientists discovered that the geothermal brine also has very high levels of lithium. So now scientists from Lawrence Berkeley Lab and a set of partner companies are actually putting in a separate lithium separator. So the hot water comes out of the ground, you take the heat out of the hot water, you then take the lithium out of the warm water, and you stuff the water back down in the ground again, and you get clean energy and the ingredients for energy storage. And so that's an example of places where you find other fields kind of coming into water. But Neil, as you said, I think another really interesting and important element of water is behavior. And so in some respects, the hydro panel represents a behavior change, a welcome behavior change, because I don't want to walk for hours and get buckets of water. But I think that there are also places where our current design environment disregards the value of water. And when we build cities, I'm in San Francisco right now. So I'm in San Francisco. So City of San Francisco did something really interesting. They passed an ordinance, actually they imposed an ordinance that said all new apartment buildings, more than I think 45 units, have to have premise scale water reuse systems. And all the real estate developers are like, wow, what is this? Blah, 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 raise the price, blah, blah, blah. But San Francisco said, okay, suck it up. You're making enough money, but we're going to impose this. And so what's happened in San Francisco is some of these new luxury high rises have got some of the most elegant and sophisticated water collection and capture systems. And that does two things. Not only does it lower the burden of the water demand of that new building, but one of the reasons why SFPUC, the Public Utilities Commission that runs the water systems here, one of the reasons why they were strongly behind it is if this new building arrives and it doesn't put any more sewage into the treatment plant, I don't need to upgrade my sewers. So I get a huge savings. It's like the girls who don't have to go walking anymore. I don't have to go dig up, thousands of feet of pavement in San Francisco and upgrade my sewer system. And this, Neil, is kind of where one of the really interesting things about hydro panels and energy is that I think, Gargi, you pointed out the fact that they look conspicuously like solar panels, right? And that it's not just, for the design. The fact is that the energy sector has already made this interesting transition. It used to be 20 years ago that all of our power was generated with large centralized power plants. They were burning coal, they were burning gas, basically burning stuff. And now today we still have that generation capacity, but we augment it with distributed generation on people's roofs, right? And in some cases, like my house is almost entirely self-sufficient. Even though I live in Oakland, and even though I have, PG&E as a potential utility supplier, I'm just about net even, which makes me feel good. We're working on the same schemes for water. So Neil's technology is an example of an ability to generate water anywhere. And we could design houses themselves once the water comes into the house, that it gets reused over and over again. And Neil, there's I don't know if you know the movement, the 50-liter home movement.
Yep.
But it's a European movement. And it's like,
yep.
Well, 50-liter home, that sounds like a couple of your panels, boy, and we're off to the races.
Right. I mean, that's the cool thing about it, Peter, is that when you think about off the grid water for the whole home, it's actually not that far off. 50-liter home combined with, I would say, 4 hydro panels, depending on what it is.
And the recycling systems.
And the recycling system, and you're there. And it is the kind of thing where, what seems like a radical future is actually pretty close to being here right now, right? And then I think the big thing, getting back to behavior change, is how do you introduce these technologies to people in a way that they fully adopt them and embrace them and bring them into their homes? And one thing that may seem, kind of outlandish, hang on a second, let me see if I can grab it here. But one of the things that we recognize with some of the insight work is that people need to know that this water is incredible tasting water, and it's, perfect for human health. And so one of the things we did is we partnered with Whole Foods, and we've launched Source branded water in Whole Foods in all of California, in the Southern Pacific, Hawaii, and Southwest, to truly demonstrate that water from the sky is not only the most renewable, sustainable water that currently is, but it tastes amazing, and it's sitting on the shelf against extractive water brands that fundamentally changes that whole category of water. And once you kind of imprint that notion that this water from the sky, or for any other technology, is worthy of that stature, then you say, you know what? And by the way, we believe access to great water is a fundamental human right. And that same water, that same technology, we just installed 500 homes in the Navajo Nation, right? So that gets to every person, every place.
everybody deserves high quality water, Neil.
Everyone deserves that same high quality water.
Absolutely. Great.
Yep.
Great. Hey, want to make sure everybody else has an opportunity to ask a question. Hannah, Lee, Tom, Connor, anybody else? Oh, here's Hannah. She says, have there been any discussions as to how your technology could be used to reduce water waste in industrial farming practices, such as through drip irrigation? And actually, another version of that is container, sort of controlled environment ag, et cetera. So tell us where kind of this atmospheric water generators flange up to ag and food production.
Look, I mean, I think vertical farming and containerized production is actually a really great fit, right? Because typically there is a low water use, but it needs to be really good water, right? And then there is humid environments, so that water is off the plants coming back into the air in a contained area, so that water can then be reharvested and reprocessed and then brought back into the system. So it's actually a wonderful use of that technology.
And frankly, in containerized ag, the only way you want the water to leave is like in the form of a tomato or a strawberry.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason you want the water
in the finished product. That's exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Great question. What other questions do you have, folks? I know people are sitting out there. I have one question, Neil. One of the things I've often thought about, and this is where the hydro panels is an example of this, is that there's like a time value of water, right? So the folks at that village, they travel hours, they get their water, they come back. There are places where we could do something productive, but we just simply lack the water and we don't have time to drill a well. And wells are expensive and they take a long time. So are there any application spaces that you're finding that atmospheric water generators would be particularly valuable besides providing high quality water for drinking? Are there any other environments where the put in a panel today, start drinking the water tonight kind of thing is valuable?
There's a ton of those applications. I'll give you another one that's a sort of a more US based version of that fetching, which, the Navajo Nation was one where, and if anyone has driven through the Southwest and through Navajo Nation, you'll see that homes are very, spread out, and there's no centralized infrastructure for many of those homes. And the primary way of getting water is through either bottled water from Walmart, and those can be, hours away, or through large carboys, those kind of big containers on the back of someone's pickup truck, right? Which has its own set of challenges, but we're talking hours to go make those journeys and make those trips. One of the things and there's a ton of applications that are off this beaten path that we're talking about, where this technology can be deployed in remote work sites, for example, where there's a team of people, their health is paramount to get the work done in those areas, but there's no access to clean, safe drinking water. So deployment of these in those environments is another area we see a lot of productivity.
I was thinking also, Neil, that you have places like I've seen Caltrans, for example. I've talked to somebody at Caltrans, and they might plant, after a forest fire, they might plant a bunch of saplings, and saplings are very delicate, very demanding of water on a regular basis.
Totally.
And you're like, what am I going to do? Get a 5,000 gallon tank out here and blah blah.
You for sure could hook it up.
Yeah. So you could just dribble enough, especially for little plants. That's a level of water demand that a hydro panel might make sense for.
And this is true of desal, the technology you're working on, as well as the hydro panels. But one of the biggest issues is that people need water to be where they are. It used to be civilizations gathered around watering hole, now really? Civilizations are requiring the water to go to them, right? And now with climate change, those weather patterns are changing so dramatically that the water is not as predictable as it used to be. Groundwater is being extracted in ways that's not available to some communities. The punchline is that most people are solving this problem, the decentralized water, with bottled water, with plastic bottled water. And 1 trillion plastic bottles are sold and consumed every year. Think about that. Trillion to solve the problem of getting the water where it needs to be for that person to drink it.
And most of those containers get ultimately discarded and shredded back in the
100%.
environment, and you wonder why we have a microplastics problem.
100%, right? And so, and we think about reverence for the ocean, and that is the source of all of this water, right? That's evaporating out, as Wes said, like it's all full circle, right? So as we start to eliminate the plastic packaging and we start to have reusable containers and then have decentralized ways of getting micro water production everywhere it's needed, you start to see where the ripple effect of that from certainly a human health, but from an environmental standpoint is a massive unlock.
Yeah.
You know, I think another real advantage of this going to the decentralized small scale is that, especially for us in the industrialized world, you know, what is it? Less than 5% of the people even know where their water comes from. So there's no kind of hands-on real, you know, relationship with water itself. It's kind of like turn on the tap, like, you know, you plug something into the wall for electricity, and there's no, you know, and I think one of the things we're hinting around is that a lot of what's blocking these kinds of technologies is not technology, but behavioral changes, shifts in perceptions by people of, you know, where their water comes from, what the quality is, and so forth and so on. So if you could talk about that.
Totally.
Hey, we have 2 more minutes. I want to make sure that Stuart, who has finally resurfaced. Stuart, I hope you're safe where you are.
Thank you, Peter. Well, you and Neil carried the throne beautifully. So thank you guys for being
carried the water.
Carried the water. That's
obvious,
right.
Yes, and you're just like water, flowing beautifully. I love seeing the smiles of our emissaries' faces, and I know how rich this is for them to hear your personal stories and your journeys, and just your frank openness about, you know, how you're looking at water and how you're passionate about it. Each of them has some connection to water in some way, and while it may not be their career, they're gaining a greater understanding of the importance and the connection of water to everything in our lives, which is so vital. And I think particularly you both have really mentioned about the fact that water has been looked at as a cost, and we need to shift that relationship and the way that we look at water, and it from a cost to a value, because it is beyond value. It is, you know, it is priceless, and we are going to see the price of water go up dramatically here, as it should be, because it is underpriced and undervalued. And only when people run out of it do they really recognize the value, because until then they just assume it's going to turn on when they turn their tap on. But there's been over 20 communities in 2021 in the United States that ran out of water. When people went to turn their tap on, there was nothing there. And this is going to become more and more and more prevalent just because of what's happening with our water.
Sure. Just here in Maricopa County, you know, in the desert here, 2 communities that are on the perimeter of Scottsdale, Arizona, which if you've ever been here is, you know, a buzzing, probably highest growing community in the United States. Literally, Scottsdale said, we're not doing any more water service to you. So these are 500 homes that all of a sudden, like a light switch, they've got to figure out water. And that's going to happen all over this country, and it's happening all around the world. So I just wanted to say thank you all for putting your brilliant minds to work on this particular problem, and anything we can do to be helpful in your journey, please let us know.
Thank you.
All right, Stuart, thank you very much.
Anyone have one last question you want to ask Peter or Tom? I mean, Neil? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you guys again, both for your support and your brilliance and your passion and your leadership in this industry. And hopefully we'll see our emissaries come forward like you are to become our future leaders in all things water and climate change.
You bet.
Perfect.
We'll see you out there.
Great. Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye,
much.
everybody.
You guys. Bye.
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 Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. We'll see you on Monday.